There is a mental health crisis here in the United States. Depression, anxiety, and suicide is at an all-time high and is affecting people at younger ages. The numbers are increasing in the Black community as well. For centuries, we had no choice but to hold on and to keep pushing. Many of our ancestors and elders did not possess the accessibility, finances, or in some cases, the right to seek mental help. But we have the resources they didn't have. Or do we? Has pseudoscience that's rooted in scientific racism fueled the misdiagnosis or overdiagnosis of mental illnesses for Black people? Does the Black man have schizophrenia or mood disorder? How does a person distinguish sadness from depression? Will they be diagnosed and treated fairly and accurately? At what point does a person seek help, professional help? And do they even have the means? If you want to know, like I want to know, let's get into the video. Us are dealing with some form of sadness, anxiety, or feeling of defeat. We've all heard the sayings, it'll be all right, you're going through a phase, give it time and it'll pass, right? And it'll work itself out or something like that. And not to be dismissive of those sayings, because to some degree they can hold true, right? But when you're really going through it, there's really a big possibility that you don't want to hear none of that. So it is predicted that by the year 2030, depression will be the second leading cause of health disability in the world. So with such an increase in mental health issues and even more of an increase in the Black community, why are Black people still avoiding therapy? Well, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, there's a population of 41.6 million Black people, which makes us 12.4% of the U.S. population. Of course, that is based off of those who actually filled out the census. So there's possibly more than that. And there is a shortage of psychiatrists and counselors of color. And the shortage is even more prevalent with it for those who identify as Black or African American. And just to go ahead and get into it, because some of this information I looked up in some sources, they use a word African American, and in some sources they use Black. I tend to use Black, but there will be times that I use Black and African American interchangeably, because although we should know the difference. You can be African, you can be Black and not be African American, but you can be an American, so I will probably use them interchangeably, but I mean all Black people, no matter what part of the world you're from, if you're a U.S. citizen. All right. So, and a lot of this information can hold true for the entire world, for everywhere pretty much, because depression and mental illness is serious everywhere. However, the information in this video will be specific to citizens of the United States. So data from the American Psychiatric Association, the APA, shows that only 2% psychiatrists in the U.S. are Black and just 4% psychologists are Black. Most therapists in the U.S. are white, and that's at 76.4%, Asians at 10.6%, and Hispanics at 6.3%. But overall, most therapists are women. In addition to the lack of Black mental health professionals, socioeconomic disparities and stigma play a huge role for why Black people are not seeking help. However, although we know stigma plays a big part, those stigmas are decreasing as the years come. And we're actually not going to focus on the stigmas in this video. Although they're very important. I will cover that in another video specific to stigmas of mental health. But for this video, I want to focus on socioeconomics and the lack of black health professionals, and scientific racism, because just focusing on stigma, I believe that's an easy way of not actually holding the system accountable, because a lot of those stigmas still stem from the messed up system that we have. All right, so while there is a plethora of white therapists available, and since they are professionally trained, they should be able to assist a black person who is seeking counseling. However, most black people would prefer to seek counseling from a therapist they feel most comfortable with. And that would most likely mean a black psychiatrist or psychologist. This is partially, if not mostly, due to a lot of our trauma stemming from racial issues and also having cultural differences. It's so easy for people to say, get help, get a therapist, or you need professional help. But it is not that easy for black people to gain access in general. It is not easy for black people to gain access to mental health professionals, and specifically black mental health professionals, right? So I have some stats from the Mental Health America, MHA. I will also leave a link to that website in the description, so if you want to look at it or anything. But these stats are, I believe most of them are from 2018, but a lot of it is still hold true here in 2022. They still hold pretty much true. Maybe the numbers might be a little off, but not really that much. So it states that adult blacks and African Americans are more likely to have feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness than white adults. Blacks and African Americans are less likely than white people to die from suicide at all ages. However, Black and African American teenagers are more likely to attempt suicide than white teenagers. So white people, according to them, are still more than likely to die by suicide, but these teenagers, the young people, our black teenagers and young people are more likely to commit it, to at least attempt it. They may not die from it, but they attempt more than white teenagers. And those numbers are actually increasing. Like I said, these are from probably, I think, 2018, 19, something like that. But trying to find more relevant information, but it's always changing, right? So historical adversity, which includes slavery, sharecropping, and race-based exclusion from health, educational, social, and economic resources, translates into socioeconomic disparities experienced by Black and African American people today. Socioeconomic status, in turn, is linked to mental health. People who are impoverished, homeless, incarcerated, or have substance use problems are at higher risk for poor mental health. Despite progress made over the years, racism continues to have an impact on the health of Black and African American people. Negative stereotypes and attitudes of rejection have decreased, but they continue to occur with measurable adverse consequences. History and contemporary instances of negative treatment have led to a mistrust of authority, many of whom are not seen as having the best interests of Black and American people in mind. Black people also might feel hopelessness or mistrust when being assessed by someone from a non-person of color who is a mental health professional, which could also affect how they act and how the clinician interprets their symptoms. Now that I know can definitely hold true, because if you're having, say you're having, your job is stressing you and you're having a lot of, you're in not even just corporate America, but you're at a job that's predominantly white, there could possibly be, and more than likely, a lot of microaggressions going on, right? So how do you talk about that with your, if you have as a black person to a white therapist? It could be very hard because they don't understand. They can hear you, and from my research, in most cases, they don't even really like to touch a lot of racial issues. It even makes some black therapists uncomfortable. So imagine being a black person going to a white therapist and you're talking about the microaggressions on your job, or you're talking about how you feel about what's going on in the world, the anxiety you have for your black son or your black daughter when they go out every day. It would be very hard. So it's very important that you have a culturally competent therapist who can really help hone in on those specific issues that's bothering you, and that understands, that can see you. Now, granted, we know all skin folk and kinfolk, so even just because that therapist is black does not mean they're going to connect with you or you're going to connect with them. So, but it's more likely that you will. All right, so also 23.8% of black Americans live in poverty and may not have healthcare benefits that will allow them affordable counseling. Social factors such as food insecurity, income inequality, adverse early childhood experiences are responsible for inequitable outcomes and are created by unequal distribution of opportunities and advantages in society. So with that being said, that leads me to discuss structural racism. And structural racism is not something a term that we really hear on a regular basis. Typically, we hear institutional racism on a day-to-day basis, or something. Well, not a day-to-day basis, but typically when we're talking about racism, right? So structural racism, defined by Aspen Institute, is defined as a system in which public policies, institutional practices, cultural representations, and other norms work in various, often reinforcing ways to perpetuate racial group inequity. It is the underlying mechanism that drives unequal distribution of opportunities and advantages in society. So structural racism predicts which groups and patients can and will have access to mental health care services. And without considerable wealth, access to mental health care is limited by the paucity of mental health care providers who accept insurance. And you all, that definitely includes like insurances like Medicaid. When you're trying to get quality care, it's really hard when it comes down to mental health, and it can be pricey even with insurance, right? And also a lot of providers don't like to accept a lot of insurance such as Medicaid and things like that. It's really hard to find providers to accept those type of insurances. So structural racism overall is the driving force behind mental health inequities. So here are some information that I looked up regarding these socioeconomic disparities, and some stats to kind of help you understand. So while the implementation of the Affordable Care Act did help to close the gap of uninsured individuals, 11.5% of Black and African Americans versus 7.5% of white Americans were still uninsured in 2018. So there still was a considerable amount of Black people uninsured, even with the Affordable Care Act going on. And nearly 90% of Black and African American people over the age of 12 with substance use disorder will not receive treatment. In 2018, 58.2% of Black and African American young adults 18 to 25 and 50.1% of adults 26 to 49 with serious mental illness did not receive treatment. And in 2016, 12.3% of Black and African American adults who had a doctor's visit or clinic visit over the past year had difficulty getting needed care, tests, or treatment compared to 6.8% of white adults. So even when searching and getting the treatment, Black people are having a harder time getting quality care. So more than 1 in 5 Black and African American people in the U.S. lived in poverty as of 2018. Black and African American people living below poverty are twice as likely to report serious psychological distress than those that are living 2 times over the poverty level. So let's talk about that. So with all of that being said, it's basically reinforcing that Black people are less likely to have access to mental health services, and that's because either they don't have the insurance. So even with the Affordable Care Act, there still was a significant amount of people, Black people versus white people, who still were not insured, and without insurance, you're not going to get any mental health or behavioral health help. It's very pricey. So and also although Black people tend to have more psychological, Black people have had psychological issues, they are less likely to actually seek out the help. And that could be and that is a lot of times due to money, lack of insurance. If you don't have those things, you're not going to seek the help even when you know you need it. And even when they did even when Black people do seek out the help, they're not provided the care that they needed. They're usually, a lot of times these doctors will rush you out of their offices and things like that, or they'll just maybe prescribe you something, but you're not really getting the true quality care. So there might be diagnosing you with one thing and prescribing you something that just doesn't align. So now you're not really getting help. You're still not having nobody that can help you actually guide and how to cope with whatever it is that you're going through. And due to the high cost, Black people are more than likely than any other racial group to end services prematurely. And I can even speak on that from my own personal experience, that it's expensive. After my job, and a lot of jobs who offer health benefits do have a employee assistance program. It's called EAP. But with the EAP, with mine, you get 5 free visits. 5. And when I tell you, those five visits go by fast. Like, that's nothing, because it's not really, it's something, don't get me wrong, it's a head start. But after that, you're going to have to pay that copay. And every time after those 5 visits, I have to pay $100 for my visit. And when you're in the beginning stages of getting therapy, you're going to it's going to be recommended that you see your therapist at least once a week. And then down the line, you might do twice a month and then once a month. But it is definitely recommended in the beginning that you're going weekly. But that's $400 a month. That's a big bill. So because it's a little pricey, it could be a little pricey, I may have to cut back when I know I need those services. And that happens not just to me, but to other people. So a lot of times, it's just the copays are very expensive. And I don't know if mine is just extremely high or what someone else is. If y'all in therapy and y'all have copays, let me know in the comments, like, how much is, not to get all in your business, but is your copay very pricey? Does your job offer EAP program? And actually, how many visits do you get for free before you have to start paying? So because of the prices and because of the poverty level, and I'm gonna tell you this, I didn't actually look up the poverty, what numbers consider poverty, and I really should have, but actually no. Give me a second. Let me do that right now. All right. So I just looked up what is considered poverty in the United States, and this is off of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the website. I'll put in the link. Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation. So if you have a two persons household, it's 17,420, 321, 960, 26,000. I hope I didn't say 100, but 26,500, and so forth and so on. Like I said, I'll leave the link in the description. So those incomes are extremely low. But truth be told, the way I see it, if you ain't rich or wealthy, you poor. Many black people aren't actually avoiding therapy by choice. A lot of it is due, like I stated before, is due to a lack of black mental health professionals, socioeconomic inequalities, lack of effective treatment, and then there's scientific racism. Scientific racism, which is sometimes would be called biological racism, is the pseudoscientific belief that empirical evidence exists to support or justify racism, racial inferiority, or racial superiority. So basically, like, pretty much since the enslaved people, since the free people from Africa was kidnapped and brought to this country, advocates that are advocates of anti-black racism and who are people who support white supremacy designated themselves the authority to the authority of science to justify racial inequalities, right? Pushing pseudoscientific narratives to prove that white people are biologically superior. So many of these ideologies, unfortunately, still influence today's society, and it's really sad. So this is pretty much how they justify kidnapping the free Africans and bringing them and enslaving them over here in the Americas. So, and scientific racism is just one of the most effective methods to justify anti-black racism and to uphold white supremacy. So I'm gonna give you a few stats regarding this subject. So let's start with, black mothers are at greater risk for postpartum depression, but are less likely to receive treatment. And it's not because they don't want to receive treatment, because while you're pregnant, you more than likely have the insurance. Whether you just get pregnancy Medicaid, but because of the beliefs that of the strong black woman, oh, she's just sad, oh, she's just adjusting, we don't get diagnosed as much as likely as, say, a white woman. So black people are underdiagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and mood disorders. So a lot of us, if not all of us, actually deal with a level of post-traumatic stress disorder. I truly believe it. But we're not diagnosed. We're usually underdiagnosed or it's not taken seriously. It's not taken seriously by some medical professionals. All right, and statistics also show that over 50% of those who are incarcerated have mental health concerns. So basically, this suggests that rather than receiving treatment for mental illnesses, BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, end up incarcerated because of their symptoms. So this brings me to talk about schizophrenia. And this is something that I really just learned while researching for this video. So a lot of this information regarding schizophrenia and black men is very much new to me. So let me read you some of the stats that I got from that. So it states that black and African American people, men more specifically, are more often diagnosed with schizophrenia and less often diagnosed with mood disorders compared to white people with the same symptoms. Black men have been misdiagnosed and overdiagnosed with schizophrenia as their emotions are read as being psychotic. So schizophrenia, according to the American Psychiatric Association, so this is the current definition of schizophrenia, is defined as a chronic brain disorder that affects less than 1% of the U.S. population. When schizophrenia is active, symptoms can include delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, trouble with thinking, and a lack of motivation. So like I stated, that definition is the current definition. We're definitely going to get more into what it used to be considered. But when you think of schizophrenia, you also think of paranoia, which can be a symptom of schizophrenia as well, right? So here's the thing about having a white clinician. They could mistake your paranoia for psychological paranoia, which is common in schizophrenia patients, but a lot of times black people and black men specifically are experiencing what is called cultural paranoia, which is relevant to this because it's defined as in layman's terms as a mistrust of white doctors. As we know, black men do not like to, generally speaking, I don't want to make this an absolute, but generally speaking, black men don't like to go to the doctor. Your wives, your girlfriend have to either set your appointment, tell you over and over again, hey, you need to check your health, you need to check this, do this, get a checkup, go to the dentist, do this, do that. They don't like to go. They don't like to go. And a lot of it, some of it is due to just their own plain out laziness and stuff like that. But a lot of it is due to their mistrust for physicians. Because as we know, throughout history, these people have used us as guinea pigs. There's a lot of things that happened to black people and black men that definitely was unfavorable to us regarding the medical field. I actually have a book that I need to read. I still have not read it yet, but let me find my book. Hold on, y'all. Ooh. All right, y'all. So I had bought this book a while ago. It's called Medical Apartheid. It's called The Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present. So a lot of the paranoia that we have as black people, it is not just in history. A lot of this stuff is very relevant. Now, I still have to read this book. I got it because I wanted to read it and learn more stuff. And I think once I finish reading it, it's kind of a big book. And I'm reading another book right now. So whenever I get to this, I'm definitely going to talk about it. But yeah. So this will tell you a lot. So the paranoia that they have is justified. It's justified. So a lot of times throughout history, black people are accused of being insane. And like I said, a lot of this is very relevant to black men. They were accused of being insane when in reality, they were just acting out due to the racial climate. Like, can you imagine somebody putting a burning cross in front of your house and knocking in your doors and doing all kind of crazy foolishness, seeing lynches and all kind of stuff like that? Like, how are you supposed to react? You're going to be angry. There's no way you're going to be happy. Like, oh, look at that. Look at him hanging from that tree. Like, you're not going to be happy. You're going to be angry. You're going to be upset. But the rage that the black people had, they looked at it as insanity. So, I'm going to butcher her name, but Dr. Arundhati Nagendra. You know I'm going to put the name somewhere down here because I know I just messed that all up. She researches racism and psychosis at Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Medical School. She believes that assessment bias during the diagnostic process and Black people experiencing more environmental risk factors for the development of schizophrenia are instrumental regarding racial disparities in the schizophrenia diagnosis. So basically, she's saying partially due to the environment and climate that Black people tend to have to live in, sometimes it can develop schizophrenia, but also that if a white person is doing the assessment, there's already a bias to it because once again they don't understand our culture, so they're very much incompetent culturally to truly diagnose us, especially depending on the issues that we have. And there is a such thing as cultural paranoia, so which is going to lead someone who is Black to probably not properly display or convey what it is that they're actually feeling and going through because they do not trust who it is they're talking to, right? So Black men were criminalized, and basically the criminalization of individuals with schizophrenia, they were criminalized. They were labeled with schizophrenia. They were diagnosed and labeled with schizophrenia and criminalized because it was assumed that they would be violent and a threat to society. So this was most prevalent during the 1960s and the Black Power movement. Schizophrenia was believed to be marked by anger, hostility, and projection. And what I didn't know, that I found out, is that Malcolm X was actually diagnosed with pre-psychotic paranoid schizophrenia, and he was by the FBI, right? So, and they diagnosed him or labeled him that because he was paranoid of the government, which he had every right to be paranoid of the government. Paranoia doesn't automatically make you schizophrenia. Those two things are not synonymous, you know. You're going to be paranoid if someone's out there trying to kill you, like they did, you know. So, and it also was a way for the FBI to create fear and worry amongst the citizens about him, and not just him, but other civil rights leaders as well. Black men were sent to psychotic hospitals for participating in the civil rights and Black Power movement back then. Hospitals such as Ionia State Hospital for the criminally insane was infamous for this. Jonathan Metzl, that's how you pronounce his name, he's the author of the protest psychosis, how schizophrenia became a Black disease. So he stated that prior to the 1960s, schizophrenia was viewed as an illness that afflicted nonviolent white petty criminals, including some of the hospital's women who lived in rural Michigan. So this hospital was based in Michigan, right? So the book is an analysis of how within the socio-political context of the 1960s and the 1970s, the intersection of race and mental health altered the way schizophrenia was diagnosed, understood, and treated in the United States. So prior to the 1960s, schizophrenia was the symptoms were nonviolent, and it affected mostly white women, right? Now fast forward, you have the Black Power movement, and you have Black people standing up for themselves. They're not taking no more of what the man is trying to stick to them. You know, they're what people would call acting crazy, and they had every right to. But instead of the powers that be recognizing that they're just acting out in retaliation to how they're being treated, they labeled them schizophrenia, and guess what? Sent them to hospitals, but jails pretty much, for crimes that they did. So if they were violent, if they fought back or did anything like that, they will label them schizophrenia. So by the mid to late 1960s, schizophrenia was a diagnosis that was disproportionately applied to the hospital's Ionia growing population of African American men from urban Detroit. Many of the men were sent to Ionia after convictions for crimes that range from armed robbery to participation in civil rights protests to property destruction during periods of civil unrest, such as the Detroit riots of 1968. Many of the charts would stress and would talk about how hallucinations and delusions rendered these men as threats not only to other patients, but also to clinicians, ward attendants, and to society itself. So what these doctors did in that hospital / jail / prison in Detroit was they continued to find ways to keep them there. So these men might get sentenced for 2 years, 2 years for loitering or something like that. And they get sent to the psychiatric hospital prison. And these doctors would continue to write in their charts, oh, he's hallucinating. Oh, he has a lot of anger. He needs to stay longer. So these men will go in there and be sentenced by the judge for 2 to 5 years. But then this doctor turns around and writes in their chart that they need to stay longer. And a lot of times for a lot of those men, it end up being life sentences. So it's really sad the way racism and plays a role in science, and how the powers that be utilize science to justify their way of keeping Black people oppressed. So, of course, they were mostly misdiagnosed. A lot of them probably were just depressed. A lot of them was just simply angry. Like, probably had no true mental illness, but they were just simply angry. And if they had schizophrenia, they kind of developed it, because imagine, it's no way I can imagine being sentenced to a year and now I'm in there for life. I'm going to go crazy. There's just no way. So, the situation is very sad and it's very unfortunate. That's why I do think we have to be very mindful when we talk about our elders and people who grew up during those times, because a lot of times I see on social media, especially by a younger generation, they like to say, oh, my grandma, she never got healed, she needs to heal. And it's so easy to say, oh, well, the resources are here now, but as I just explained to you all, the resources aren't that easy to come by. So imagine going through all of that back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, hell, even now today, but going through that type of life, and a lot of times those generational curses do continue on. It's not to justify it, it's not to say it's right, but we do need to have a lot more compassion for those that came before us, that really lived through that time, because it's really sad. They really went through a lot, and they could not seek therapy. And even now, a lot of them aren't living in favorable conditions to seek therapy still. Healing takes time, and some people never get the opportunity. Even when it comes to, Black men, a lot of this that we see now within Black men is post-traumatic stress disorder. Because a lot of that anger that the fathers and the grandfathers, the great-grandfathers experienced gets passed on. It just changes. It's still anger, but it changes its form. Because of course we're not living exactly in those times, but these times ain't no better. I know a lot of us are experiencing anxiety due to the climate. I mean, black men and women are getting shot down. Unarmed black men and women are getting shot by the police every time we turn around. A lot of times, I know I can't ignore it, but sometimes I just gotta tune out because it's a lot. I'm raising a son, and right now he might be looked at as a cute little boy, but in about 10 years, he ain't gonna be no cute little boy to them no more. You know, he's gonna be a grown man, considered a grown man. And I think about that, you know, and it's kind of it's like, what do you do? So the best thing that we could do a lot of times is just be honest. We don't have to be overly vulgar when we're telling them things. We don't have to show the children everything. Once again, I cannot tell you what to do with your child, but I don't feel the need to show my son someone getting shot down in order for him to understand that, hey, this is the reality we live in. We need to be honest, but, you know, be a little tactful with it, and make sure that we love on them. Make sure that we're just keeping them knowledge. Make sure we're providing them knowledge. Make sure they have knowledge of self, like really knowing yourself, understanding what has happened to our ancestors, what did our elders go through, and doing our best to create human beings that are compassionate, understanding, because that could go a long way with our mental health as well. A lot of us people out here really just don't be caring about nothing. They don't care about nothing. And I get it. And some of it can be due to mental illness, and then some of it is just the personality. Some of y'all just got bad personalities, but I didn't mean to get all into that. But we really, as a people, need to really we got to figure out a solution. And I know I ain't got all the answers, but so here are some possible solutions to kind of help us as black people to better advocate for ourselves, and those who are in the mental health spaces to advocate for us as well. Don't just get comfortable because you're in a place where you're in your career and things like that. Dr. Najendra states that advocacy and attention are required to dismantle structural racism and to build policies that support mental health equity. So it's very important for those psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, or whatever your profession is in the mental health realm to really advocate for black people when you're a clinician or a therapist of color, because we really need your assistance and your help to be able to create spaces, and also to help us, you know, possibly inspire somebody else to become a therapist or a psychiatrist or psychologist, so that we can have more. Also, black patients need to keep demanding more from our practitioners. Please do not allow them to rush you out your appointment. I understand that they have a lot of patients to attend to. They do. They work hard. But at the end of the day, we pay them a lot of money to do their job, and they need to do their job. Don't let them rush you out. Also, ask questions and make sure that they are answered and that you actually comprehend the answer before you leave your appointment. Don't just sit there wondering and then try to Google it later. Let them answer them questions. That's what they get paid to do. Also, ask about medications. Ask about the side effects. Ask about, does this work? Ask about the statistics of the medication. Also, if you feel like you want a test performed, request it. Request the test to be performed. You have the right. You have to advocate for yourself. And also, last but not least, if they're not doing their job, you owe them no loyalty. I don't care if they are black, white, whatever they are. You can switch providers. Switch providers. You owe them no loyalty. All right, so I'm going to leave some resources or whatever I can find down in the description to help anyone who may be looking for mental health or behavioral health specialists. If you have healthcare benefits, be sure to look into your job and look into your employee assistance program, the EAP program. Ask questions. They're always going to be someone to talk to regarding that program. You may not be able to get the information from your supervisor or manager, but call the number, whoever handles the EAP program, and ask and see if there's ways to maximize the visits that you get. If you have an HSA or FSA account, please do your best to hold on to that money in that account and not switch it over to your personal debit account, because if you're going, whenever you're going to need, you know how to work. When you have co-pays, it's very beneficial to have that money in the account and not utilize it for stuff that's transferred and use it for stuff that's non-medical, because those co-pays to see a therapist, they're pricey. It adds up. Like I said, mine is $400 a month if I go every week. That's a bill, you know? So it's just important to have that cushion, because your mental health, it is important and you need to take care of it. Take that PTO, take that short-term disability, that FMLA, go to the beach, exercise, and yes, exercise help. Eat healthy, because that plays a big role in our mental health as well. Meditate, get a pedicure, or whatever it is that brings you some form of peace. Every now and again, just do something that brings you some form of peace of mind. It's very essential to your overall physical and mental wellness. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Like. If you like this video, please like it. Also share it to your Facebook, share it to whatever social media platform allows you to share this video. And be sure to subscribe. You ain't come all this way and watch the end of this video and then subscribe. Subscribe. And while you're at it, watch another video. You might as well just stay and just continue to be here at B-Centric TV. But anywho, as always, be beautiful, be black, be you.